Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, taking a super fun and exciting video for you guys today, especially if you're a fan of Dreamcast Emulation. That is because Deecy, the experimental Dreamcast emulator written in Zig, has gotten a nice meaty update, and it is much better performant since the last time I took a look at it. And even though I'm more of a fan of coding in Zag versus Zig, that is a joke if you didn't get it, this is absolutely impressive stuff. I will say right now it is still in active development though, and it's not something that you're going to basically pivot from Flycast or Redream for, but it could get there in the future. As I like to say on the channel, these are always important developments. Even if we have excellent Dreamcast and Naomi emulation on the market, even if it is free, more developments and more learned information will always benefit the community moving forward. So getting a brand new Dreamcast emulator, especially one that's improving at the rate of DC, is a wonderful thing. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But I will say, since I last took a look at this emulator, it has improved a ton, especially in the frame rate and the frame pacing department. The last time I took a look at it, I said that the frame pacing could be all over the place, and I actually talked to the developer, he gave me some tips, and now that's basically been completely fixed in this version of DC, and that's definitely something that's going to make a big difference. I mean, honestly, playing Sega Rally 2 here, outside of the fact that I'm not driving the greatest today, it really is hard to say that there's anything wrong with the image, with the performance, or otherwise. Every once in a while it might drop a frame or two here and there, but it is performing extremely well. Now, I'm not sure exactly of the overhead on a system for DC, but I will say, every once in a while when it does drop frames, I can hear my CPU water cooling fans definitely ramp up, so it might be something where it's actually hitting the CPU a little bit too hard, or getting a little bit kind of bottlenecked on something. Again, it's not really a technical explanation, it is just my observations. But if I was to freeze the screen and basically give you a screenshot of this and say it was Flycast or Redream, I don't think anyone whatsoever would be able to tell the difference. And that honestly is the goal, because as Dreamcast fans, we're spoiled for options for emulation, and one more on the actual internet is not going to be a bad thing. And it's nice to see that DC likes to do things a little bit differently, and it definitely has a good UI as well for those people that want to kind of get into the UI elements of it. But as far as playing something like Sega Rally 2, I could play this thing from start to finish outside of the fact that I ran out of time. But let's move over to something in 2D, because it's always nice to check whether or not the emulation is stronger on 3D or 2D, or if it's really doing the same job across both. Because don't forget, as good of a 3D system as Dreamcast was compared to something like N64, PlayStation 1, or Sega Saturn, it also could be a 2D powerhouse, giving us some amazing 2D games like Capcom vs. SNK here. It's one of those things, the Dreamcast excels in 2D, as does the Naomi, and you absolutely want to see how good it looks. As we come into the actual stage here, all of the pixels are there, all the background is there, even those shadows on the wall just looks absolutely stunning. So I would say, compared to the last time I took a look at DC, the graphical performance and overall rendering of the image has improved vastly. I really didn't find any graphical glitches in the first two games I captured whatsoever, they just seemed to work perfectly fine. And as far as the input is concerned, I didn't really feel any latency on my end. Now, I'm not measuring this right now because the actual emulator isn't finished developing, so there could be a frame here or there, but as far as the overall quote-unquote feel of this game, it felt no different than playing it on something like Flycast, and that's definitely what we want here. And if you do notice in some of the fighting game footage, I just kind of jump around, not really doing much. I'm trying to get a feel for the controls and how everything registers as far as the inputs are concerned. Although I will say I ran into one game that I'll show you at the end of the video that has a very weird glitch as far as D-pad inputs are concerned. So if you've been playing around with this and you've had any issues with the D-pad on games, leave me a comment down below and you tell me which ones they were, because I only found that on one. Let's go into our first of two soundtrack samples, not only to hear the audio quality coming out of DC, but pay attention to the kicks and punches and strikes and the sound effects they have, because if they're delayed even a few frames, you're absolutely going to be able to tell. So go ahead and listen, pay close attention to all of the different strikes and sound effects, and I'll be right back to show you two more games, one that worked well and one that didn't.
Hey, come on, come on!
Not only does everything sound good there, but you can tell that the sound effects are perfectly synced up to the actual animations and impacts on the screen. Because last time I tested Deecy, I felt like there was a little bit of an audio lag in the emulation. Now, of course, I have a pretty high test system to run this on, an i9-12900K and a 3080 Ti with 64GB of RAM. And at current RAM pricing, having that 64GB probably means I'm a millionaire at this point in time. I know that has nothing to do with the video, but I just can't believe the absolute absurdity of what PC components are costing these days because of AI. Absolutely a bummer, so I'm definitely going to keep this RAM and hope to God it doesn't break. Well, let's move into the next example here. We're going to be playing Power Stone, and this is one on the original version of Deecy that I tested out. Absolutely chugged and absolutely just brought things down to a slideshow. Now, I don't want you to think that when I point out issues, I'm saying that this isn't a great emulator. It is, and these are how these things get made. They are experimental, they have to go through different development phases, they have to go through different versions until you get to an area where it would be fun just to sit down and play every single Dreamcast game. Because trust me, Flycast, the de facto best Dreamcast emulator I recommend to everyone, did not start out as good as it is today. It started out running like 6 games like the original Deecy did. But I will say the performance in Power Stone is much improved. I still have a little bit of an issue trying to get to a persistent 60 frames per second on this one. Sometimes it's going to drop down into the low 50s, but last time it would drop down into the seconds per frame, not frames per second category, so it is something that absolutely is just looking better. And that really is the fun thing. Having options available to everyone means that Dreamcast emulation is just going to mature, because there's still plenty of stuff that could be done out there. There's so many different platforms that are derivative of the Dreamcast that a lot of emulators actually don't run. I'd love to see Deecy maybe pick up some of those in the future to kind of even more justify the reason why it exists outside of Flycast and Redream. But when people leave the comment, why do we need this? The developer of this decided they wanted to spend their time on it, and that is good enough for everyone. It's because they love Dreamcast and want to give you another option, and I always appreciate that and always have room on the channel to talk about more stuff like Deecy. Moving into the second match here, you will see every once in a while that again it is going to drop frames, so hopefully maybe in the next 3 to 6 months, Deecy gets to a point in time where a decent system can run it at a persistent frame rate, because that is definitely something that needs to happen for any emulator to be something you would want to use. Now again, I'm not saying it's not going to get there, I'm sure it is. I'm just talking about the stage of development it's in now, but most of the transitions are at full speed, and like I said, the first time I tested this one, absolutely unplayable. You can sit down and play Power Stone from start to finish right now on Deecy and have a fun time. You just might have a frame drop here or there. And I would highly imagine the frame drops are based upon the code and not some sort of spec issue, because I have a pretty high-end PC even if it is a few years old. So I should be getting pretty full speeds here as far as Dreamcast is concerned. Let's go into the second of 2 soundtrack samples in Ikaruga, and you tell me in the comments if you can see the issue I'm currently having. I will explain what's going on in just a moment and how to fix it, but it's one of those things caught me off guard. Never seen it before, but definitely something you can work around. But here comes the music. Now it should be pretty obvious that the ship in Ikaruga does not move like that whatsoever, and for some reason on this game, you'll see here as I actually pick up the Xbox Series X pad again in the options, it's going to start flickering like it's actually reading inputs that aren't there. There's something going on with the polling rate and the polling of the controls in and of itself. I disconnected and reconnected the controller. I even restarted my system just to make sure it wasn't some sort of conflict in Windows 10. And no, I have not popped over to Windows 11 yet. I'm writing 10 and the extra security updates out until Microsoft will not give them to me anymore. If I switch over to keyboard, everything works perfectly fine. Now again, it is in development, so these things happen, but it's the one thing in this round of tests on the most recent version of Deecy that kind of gave me a little bit of a confusion until I figured out what was going on, because I thought maybe the emulator just wasn't playing the game correctly. When I went into the input and saw that I had that little wiggling window that basically said that something was going wrong with the polling of that Xbox Series X controller. I don't know why. I'm sure the developer will watch this, and if you don't know, I generally don't ask the developers questions. I kind of interact with these emulators the same way you would, so that if I have an issue, I know it's an issue you may have as well, versus me fixing it in the background and never mentioning it in the first place. But Deecy definitely has a bright future as far as Dreamcast emulation is concerned. It is massively improved since the last time I took a look at it, and I feel like maybe in 6 months or a year it'll be playing absolutely everything. If you tried it out, give me your thoughts down below, but we're done and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.